PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be doing a different kind of video, as we are actually going to be talking about how to fix the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the reasoning for this video is that I have a few friends and people who are part of the Buffalo Sabres fan base and people out there in Buffalo, New York. So because of them, I'm going to be doing this special video and breaking down the Buffalo Sabres organization and giving you not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 different ways on how to fix the Buffalo Sabres, because it's no secret they've missed the playoffs. They have one of the longest losing streaks in all of hockey, and it needs to change. It needs to be done over. So this is going to be our video here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, voice of new media, and telling you how we would fix the Buffalo Sabres. So before we get into that, go to PRConnectionsRadio.com, a voice of new media. Check out the website and all the content we have on the network. We have about a dozen shows on the platform. So go to www.PRConnectionsRadio.com, voice of new media, and check out all the content we have on there. Also go to our social media pages at PR Connections and our own show at Vegas Hockey Hub. We are on all major social media platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are on all major platforms there. And if you want to follow your host, I'm right down there at Ian J. Rachiele. So the Buffalo Sabres, from a 50,000-foot view, they look like a mess, okay? From a long pointed view, you're using binoculars and looking outwards, the Buffalo Sabres seem like a mess with no clear direction. The Buffalo Sabres seem like a team that's just kind of in a loop, kind of floating around the 500 mark. You know, they're kind of still been kind of floating around the past couple of seasons, just trying to get back to the playoffs. But how would you fix it? How would you fix the Buffalo Sabres organization? What would you do in order to get them to be a playoff team? How would you, for the first time since 2010, have the Buffalo Sabres make the Stanley Cup playoffs? And that's really what we're going to be addressing here on this episode of Vegas Hockey Hub. And this has been, like I said, a video that I've been doing planning for, I've been doing research on, and I've kind of narrowed it down and done 5 different ways for the Buffalo Sabres to eventually fix themselves and get back to the playoffs. Now, at number one, the number one way on how to fix the Buffalo Sabres is you got to have a starting goaltender. It has been no secret that ever since Ryan Miller left, and ever since he was traded and he left and went to the St. Louis Blues, you have not had a legit goaltender that has played for you. You know, ever since Ryan Miller left, I mean, you've had guys like Robin Lehner, you have Linus Ullmark, you had Carter Hutton. Like, there's been a handful of goaltenders. I mean, this past season, you had Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, you had players like Craig Anderson, Devin Levi. It just seems like the Buffalo Sabres have average goaltenders for majority of the past decade in the NHL. And it just really seems like the Buffalo Sabres are at this point in time where you really do not have an assortment of goaltenders. There really isn't a farm system where I look at your prospects and say, you have an elite goaltender just waiting around, hoping to get an opportunity with the Buffalo Sabres. I mean, just for example, you had a couple of goaltenders who did play for Buffalo as of late. I mean, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, he was solid. I mean, this was a guy who did pretty well this season with the Buffalo Sabres, but I still think that he is on that average to above average tier. Devin Levi, he was someone who was supposed to kind of reach out and evolve and be your starting goaltender based off his performance in 22-23. And unfortunately, he was just more of an average goalie this season in Buffalo. And then even a veteran goaltender like Eric Comrie, he actually had a very disappointing 2024 with the Buffalo Sabres. And even kind of going back and looking at what they have had over the past decade, like I mentioned in the season previously, even when you had a very older Craig Anderson, he was an average goaltender by the time he got to Buffalo. he was not someone that you would say was an elite goaltender like he was in Ottawa all those years ago. You had guys like Aaron Dell a couple of years ago, and he was kind of a unfortunate bust as a goaltender in Buffalo. He just did not pan out. Malcolm Subban, when he came from Vegas and with Chicago and all those stops, he eventually got to Buffalo. And if I recall correctly, I don't even think Malcolm Subban won a game with the Buffalo Sabres organization. So just over the last couple of seasons, the Buffalo Sabres goaltending has just been that lukewarm average situation. So how would you fix this? Okay. How would you go out and get a very good goaltender? Well, it's simple. You have two methods on how to acquire a starting goaltender, how to get an elite goaltender with the Buffalo Sabres. And that is you either sign one in free agency or you call up the phone and you acquire an elite goaltender in the NHL. Now, I'm going to break down both of them right here, right now, as we're talking about how to fix the Buffalo Sabres. So the first one, which is acquiring a starting goalie. So let's go for the free agency route, right? Let's say that when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, you want to go out and acquire a starting goaltender and get them in free agency. That's the route you want to go. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, well, here's a few options that you have. When it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, there are a few options when it comes to starting goaltender, and I'm going to give you a few options for goaltending. Now, for the Buffalo Sabres, really the 5 goaltenders that you could really look at this upcoming offseason. Now, this is in no particular order. This is just off the top of my head. But when it comes to the free agent goaltenders that are going to be part of the 2024 NHL free agency, you do have some options that are going to be available when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres organization. Now, the first one that you could do is go with someone like Ilya Samsonov. Now, Ilya Samsonov, he's been playing in Toronto the past couple of years. He was in Washington before that. And he is a serviceable goaltender. He's been able to help the Toronto Maple Leafs get to the playoffs. He is someone that if you want to pay, I think probably $3.5 million, he would be a goaltender that you could be on a certain situation where you have a guy like Ilya Samsonov and you pay him to be a goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres organization. That is somebody that you could put on that level and say that, you know what, Toronto Maple Leafs, they're going to move on from him because they do have a young goaltender in Joseph Woll that is going to be taking that responsibility. So you will be having Ilya Samsonov. I would say for the Buffalo, I would want to acquire a starting goaltender. Ilya Samsonov could be that guy. The second option would be going to the Vancouver Canucks and acquiring a guy like Casey DeSmith, who, once again, he is someone that has been a backup to Thatcher Demko. He was out there in Pittsburgh. Now he's in Vancouver. And if you gave him an opportunity, he could compete for that starting goaltender situation out there in Buffalo. Because, once again, you really don't have a starting goaltender out there with the Buffalo Sabres. At this point in time, and I'm using capfriendly.com as my reference point, you really, as a Buffalo Sabres organization, do not have a concrete, solid number one goaltender in your organization. And until you change that and until you bring in a starting goaltender that will be a legit guy for you, you're really not going to end up having, a great situation there. Because like I said, your 2 goaltenders right now are Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Devin Levi. And these are 2 guys under the age of 25. They're growing. I think one of them is on the end of a contract, but I'm not going to say which one because off the top of my head, I don't recall. But when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, Ilya Samsonov would be an option. Casey DeSmith would be an option. If you would want to go over to Winnipeg, Laurent Brossoit, he signed a 1-year deal after leaving Vegas to go to Winnipeg. He is someone that could be another veteran option for a organization like the Buffalo Sabres would. Out there in Seattle, Chris Driedger, he is someone who was with the Florida Panthers. He went over to Seattle during the expansion draft. He'll be a free agent of another veteran that you could bring to that organization and be on the roster. But where I'm going with this and what I'm really trying to do here is if you are the Buffalo Sabres organization, acquiring a starting goaltender is the first and most valuable asset that you will have. And considering what's going to happen the rest of the year and everything that's going on, you have to acquire a goaltender who's not just Devin Levi and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So that's the first way to fix the Buffalo Sabres, is acquire a starting goalie. Option number 2, and this is going to be a hot take. Some people are going to agree with it. Some people are going to disagree. But buying out Jeff Skinner is more of an inevitable situation at this point in time. Jeff Skinner, when he signed that deal with the Buffalo Sabres back in 2019, when Jason Botterill signed Jeff Skinner to an 8-year, $72 million deal, it looked like a steal at the time. You have to remember that Jeff Skinner had just came off, almost a year prior, having a 25-goal season. This was somebody who over the last 3 or 4 years had a combined 125 points during his last few seasons in Carolina. He was steady, he was consistent, and more importantly, he seemed like somebody that was going to be an electric, great player for the Buffalo Sabres organization. And to give credit where credit is due, and Hockey Reference is my reference here, in that first season in Buffalo, 40-goal season and a 60-point performance, he lit it up in his first season in Buffalo. He looked like he earned all that money. Then fast forward to the rest of his contract, he had a 14-goal season in 2019-2020, only 14 points in total during 2020-2021 during the shortened season. He rebounded and actually had a solid 2021-2022 where he had 60 points. And then he had his best performance of his season in 22-23. Now, ask yourself, why would I want to buy out Jeff Skinner if this past season before he had the best performance of his season? Well, it's because this season so far, Jeff Skinner has regressed and has actually not done what he needs to do with the Buffalo Sabres. Like in the 59 games that Jeff Skinner has been playing, 21 goals, 21 assists for 42 points on the season. Now, when you sit here and analyze that from an outsider's perspective, you may look at that and go, really, that's not that bad of a season. But then you got to remember that he had 80 points this last season prior. You have to remember that Jeff Skinner went from having the season prior his best season of his career, him lighting up the lamp 35 times in the season with Buffalo. This season, just 21 goals on the year. He had 47 assists in 22-23 compared to 22 in this season. So, with the Buffalo Sabres organization, this is actually among the worst performances he has had throughout an entire season. Once again, I'm not counting the shortened 2020-2021 where he only had 14 points in an entire year. That was a shortened season. That was an anomaly. There was a lot of weird stuff going on in 2020, 2021, so I excuse that. But when you sit here and see what Jeff Skinner has done, even in 2019-2020, he had 14 goals and 9 assists in 59 games. And when you compare what he has done this season in about 59 games, 21 goals and 21 assists, he is just not cutting it as a Buffalo Sabre. So despite what he did this last season, despite what he did in 22-23, that's not the world we live in right now. We live in 2023-2024 season where Jeff Skinner is not holding his weight and he's not doing what needs to be done with the Buffalo Sabres organization. And you also have to realize something about Jeff Skinner's deal. And this is the main reason I say you need to buy him out. Well, not only did Jason Botterill give him a no-movement clause, but over the next 3 seasons, he will get paid $10 million in 24-25, $7 million in 25-26, and $5 million in 26-27. Now, all 3 of those years, he will have a $9 million cap hit for the Buffalo Sabres organization. And when you just sit here and analyze what this deal means when it comes to Jeff Skinner. This is a situation where you will owe him $22 million over 3 years. That will be the total salary of it. The cap hit will be $27 million over 3 years. And now, by the way, thanks to capfriendly.com for the buyout calculator. Very useful, by the way. So if the Buffalo Sabres bought out Jeff Skinner, they would essentially have to buy him out at a near $2.5 million cost with the Buffalo Sabres organization. So to buy out the remainder 3 years of that deal, they will essentially have to buy him out and still take a cap hit of around $2.5 million for the remainder of that salary. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell Kevin Adams what to do, but what I would recommend to the Buffalo Sabres organization is I would buy out Jeff Skinner because that contract has become an anchor for the Buffalo Sabres. Because at this point in time, when you sit and analyze the Buffalo Sabres contracts and the roster and everything that they have done, it's actually quite interesting seeing what the contracts look like. Because when you sit and look at cap hits for the Buffalo Sabres, Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins, they're going to be two guys. They're going to be part of your anchor, your young core with the Buffalo Sabres organization. And then you also had the Rasmus Dahlin contract that they signed him to a long-term deal. Owen Power, they signed him to a long-term deal. So you have your 4 core members. You have Cousins, Thompson, Dahlin, and Power. So at this point in time, the Buffalo Sabres do not need a Jeff Skinner. They do not need a $9 million cap hit in Jeff Skinner. So how to fix the Buffalo Sabres? Step 1, acquire a starting goaltender. Step 2, buy out Jeff Skinner. And the third decision on how to fix the Buffalo Sabres. And this next one, Don Granato, this to me was just a terrible situation. It was kind of a lose-lose the past couple of seasons. It really hasn't been a lot of it his fault. However, the third way to fix the Buffalo Sabres is choose the right head coach. Okay, Don Granato, he needs to be gone. He needs to be out of there. And you have to replace him with a Lindy Ruff type coach. Okay? You need to replace Don Granato with somebody that is going to want to win and win now with the Buffalo Sabres organization. Because like I just said a few minutes ago, you have your core 4 members. You have your 2 main guys on the fence, and then you have your 2 main guys on offense. And depending on what you do in terms of goaltending, this is a Buffalo Sabres organization that if you get the right head coach, if you get someone who has the right mentality in that locker room, you could be a playoff winning team. You could be a playoff contending team if you choose the right guy. And what I'm recommending to everyone watching all around the world is that if I'm the Buffalo Sabres organization, if I'm someone that is in charge of what's going on, I'm picking a head coach who wants to win in Buffalo. I'm picking someone who's going to want to choose to be in Buffalo. Because, Dan Bylsma, Don Granato, there's been a few coaches that have come and gone with the Buffalo Sabres ever since Lindy Ruff left and went to Dallas all those years ago. So if I'm the Buffalo Sabres organization, I want to bring in somebody, could be an assistant coach, could be the AHL coach, regardless of who it is. You bring in someone who wants to be in Buffalo and who wants to commit to winning in Buffalo. Because over the last decade, it feels like your head coaches have either been left out to dry or they just kind of been placeholders and they eventually get dumped and moved on after a year or two. So those are the first 3 steps on how to fix the Buffalo Sabres. 1, acquire a starting goaltender. 2, buy out Jeff Skinner. And 3, choose the right head coach. Now, the fourth way to fix the Buffalo Sabres. spend money. Like, I feel like this is something that doesn't need to be said. But when it comes to the Pegula family, and when it comes to the people that run the Buffalo Sabres, you actually have to come out and say it. The Buffalo Sabres organization does not like to spend money at the trade deadline. They don't like to spend money when it comes to free agency. This is a Buffalo Sabres squad that you will rarely ever see ever splash on a big player. I mean, over the last couple of years, let me just give you a few examples off the top of my head. I mean, Taylor Hall, that was a half a season of Taylor Hall. Eric Stahl was brought in, and he actually wasn't half bad, but still Eric Stahl was brought in as an aging veteran to be put on the roster. Jeff Skinner, that 8-year deal I just talked about earlier in the show, they signed him to that massive deal. I mean, I hate to say it, but the Buffalo Sabres, especially during the Kevin Adams era, this is somebody that has definitely spent some money. I mean, I'm not saying that it was the best decisions, but he did spend money on players. Let's also remember that this is someone who has also let players go because they were not going to be able to afford paying certain guys. Let's not forget the Sam Reinhart situation, where Sam Reinhart was going to want to get paid. He deserved to get paid. And instead of that, they flip him to Florida, and they do get a haul back in Devin Levi, by the way. That's how they acquired him during the draft. But they still let go of Sam Reinhart, despite the fact that he deserved to get paid. Brandon Montour was another situation where Brandon Montour was going to want to get paid. They offloaded him, and he eventually went to the Florida Panthers alongside Sam Reinhart, and they eventually, are doing pretty successful there in Florida, made it to the Stanley Cup last year, and has been one of the best teams in all of hockey. I mean, who else are examples of players they just did not pay because they didn't want to fork up the money? Their last good goaltender, Linus Ullmark. He was not going to get paid what he was owed. He eventually left, went to Boston, and Linus Ullmark over the past 2 seasons has been one of the best goaltender duos in the NHL. So, when you really look at the Buffalo Sabres, I mean, let's be honest, outside of Rasmus Dahlin, who they did give a good amount of money to, all right, earlier this offseason, they gave him an 8x11 deal. All right, that's the first big contract signing I've seen him do in forever. Who have the Buffalo Sabres necessarily paid over the last couple of years? Now, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, they gave them a 7x7 deal. Okay, applaud them for that. Owen Power, I know that they gave him a deal kind of similar around the Rasmus Dahlin contract. So you've locked up your main 4 in terms of long-term stability. But I will also once again use Cap Friendly as my reference for the salary situation. But this is a Buffalo Sabres team that has around $25 million in cap space this upcoming offseason. Now, could you imagine, and I'm just gonna spitball here. If you're the Buffalo Sabres, could you imagine this upcoming offseason having $25 million to play with? You go out and do something with that $25 million? Like, could you actually imagine doing that? Like, this is actually an organization who doesn't really do that much, but let's just say, for argument's sake, you actually look at who is available in free agency this upcoming year. Now, there are some players that do have some good potential. Jake Gunzel, he was with Carolina at the trade deadline. I doubt they're going to be bringing him back. So, what if the Buffalo Sabres acquire Jake Gunzel and give him $7 million per year over, let's say, a 3-year deal? So let's do a 3x7 for somebody like Jake Gunzel. Or, hey, Tyler Bertuzzi. He has done pretty solid with the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. He is still in his late 20s. What if you acquire Tyler Bertuzzi and make him a valuable piece of the Buffalo Sabres organization, and they give him about $6 million to to play in Buffalo. Guys like Teuvo Teravainen, who has done about a really good, successful run in Carolina. Someone who I think could also be around a $6 million cap hit. Okay? You know what? Let's say this. Let's say if you don't want to go for forwards and you just want to focus on defense. Okay, there's some options you have on defense as well. For example, Brett Pesce. This is someone who from the Carolina Hurricanes organization. He has been there for a long time. He's going to want to get paid. He's going to want to get extended. So you eventually get him, be a second defensive pairing for the Buffalo Sabres. Give him about $5 million. Okay? And if you want to have established veterans that could be on that roster, Matt Dumba, he has been floating around the NHL. You could probably sign him to kind of a more friendly deal with the Buffalo Sabres organization. But overall, in Buffalo, I say if you spend money this offseason, you have $25 million. Spend that money, beef up your middle six, help out your second and third defensive pairing, and more importantly, back to my first point, acquire a starting goaltender. Bring in Samsonov, maybe bring in someone like DeSmith, bring in someone that could be a veteran-type goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres in free agency because you need to fix this team. You need to do something in terms of positive when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres. And the fifth and final way on how to fix the Buffalo Sabres. Okay, this is very important. I kept this for last. You have a 4-member core. Okay, I've talked about him multiple times. You have Owen Power. You drafted him first overall. You have Rasmus Dahlin. You drafted him first overall. You have Tage Thompson. You acquired him in the Ryan O'Reilly trade. You have Dylan Cousins. You drafted him in the first round. Buffalo, and I'm saying this in all sincerity, do not trade any of these 4 guys. If you're the Buffalo Sabres, you build your offense around Tage and Dylan. On defense, you make that first defensive pairing Owen and Rasmus, okay? You build the entire roster around 4 guys, okay? It doesn't matter what the rest of the roster looks like. You have these guys locked up for a long-term future. I just talked about it already in detail. You have Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin for at least the next 6 years. Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins, you will have them for at least the next 5 years in Buffalo. And all 4 of these guys are not even on the end of 28, 29. These are in the middle of their 20s. So if you're the Buffalo Sabres, if you're Kevin Adams, if you're the people working in management, you have Power, you have Cousins, you have Dahlin, and you have Thompson. You build, and build around those 4 guys. That's how you win. That's how you make the playoffs. That's more importantly how to fix the Buffalo Sabres. So once again, let's go through it one last time. 1, acquire a starting goaltender. 2, buy out Jeff Skinner. 3, choose the right head coach. Don Granato, not it. 4, do spend money this offseason. And then 5, establish a core to build around those 4, okay? Build around the 4 members that you have in Buffalo. Now, this is Vegas Hockey Hub. This was a different video than what we normally do. We will get back to the Vegas Golden Knights content. Don't worry about that. We still have Vegas Hockey Hub recap shows. We still have player profiles and all the stuff we do on the channel. So, until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. This is Vegas Hockey Hub. And until next time, continue watching hockey. Go support junior hockey. And go Knights. Go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.